Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. The documentary on the gold looting in Zimbabwe by the Al Jazeera network is finally out. It is an eye opener, unbelievable. Let's listen to this.
Episode 1 of The Gold Mafia.
We love the gangster lifestyle. You live by the gun, you die by the gun.
The biggest challenge Zimbabwe now faces is the gold mafia.
Al Jazeera's investigative unit infiltrates the rival gangs that control Africa's gold.
As long as you grease the wheels in Africa, there's no issue. Smuggler. That's what it is, smuggler. All the different chains stitched. It's not like somebody can question on it.
Former members of the Gold Mafia speak exclusively to the I unit.
The gold mafia is bigger than the government, bigger than any of the authorities. What do you think is going to happen?
They kill you, don't they?
Exactly.
Undercover journalists pose as gangsters who want to launder more than 100 million US dollars.
It's background.
The I unit obtains thousands of confidential documents that expose how organized crime groups use gold to launder money.
You sold it to a refinery and the money got paid in the bank account. So it's very clean that way.
Once it's refined, it's practically brand new gold.
A good washing machine, right? The money to be invested is not in the books in Hong Kong or China. It's background. Is it 100 million? Is it 50 million? Is it 10 million? Is it 20? Is it more than 100? Okay.
Kamlesh Pattni is one of Africa's most notorious gold dealers. He calls himself Brother Paul after founding his own church.
We try to move our money to foreign investment overseas.
Mr. Stanley leads the I unit's undercover team. They're posing as gangsters who need to launder dirty cash from China.
It's very important to get the right person. Yeah, that's a surviving call. That's it, yeah. We're going to give it to you in a very crude way. As way of expression, they're looking for a Hawala system. Yes. To get the money out. Yeah, sure.
Johnny is posing as a black market trader, our Hawala man, who moves money across borders without using banks.
That should give you a taste of what we are dealing with here. It is unbelievable stuff. You can watch the documentary yourself or go to Al Jazeera and listen to it. I believe that the second part will be shown next Thursday. Same time, 8 o'clock UK time, 10 o'clock Zimbabwean time. The take home for me in this documentary, number one, we all, or most Zimbabweans, or most people who have followed Zimbabwe would have had a feel that there was corruption in Zimbabwe. There was looting of minerals, diamonds, gold, lithium, you name it. And corruption was rampant in every part of the society under this Zanu PF regime. But we never really could put our finger on the amounts of money involved. This documentary does that. It puts the flesh on the bones and goes one step further how they are doing it. It's going to be very difficult for the Zanu PF regime to deny that corruption is rampant in Zimbabwe and is costing the nation an arm and a leg. The people who produced this documentary estimate that up to maybe $2 billion US in gold is smuggled out of the country every year. And even they who did the investigation could not be 100% sure of how much is involved. Because, of course, this gold mafia, you never know. They were talking of 4 or so people. How do they know that they are not a lot more than that? They wouldn't know. But even then, $2 billion US for a country like Zimbabwe, this is a fortune. This is unbelievable amount of money. The country's annual budget is $4 billion US. This is an unbelievable amount of money. So we are looking at here already 50% of the country's annual budget, the equivalent of what the country spent, is disappearing. It's being wasted. It's leaking away. How can a country develop with that kind of level of wastage? So the amount of money involved has been significant. The other important thing that has come out of this, that is going to come out of this, is there are some countries, in SADC in particular, who have been stubborn to insist that Zimbabwe's economic meltdown was not caused by mismanagement and corruption, but sanctions. Zanu PF itself has, of course, tried to promote that line. But that cannot be sustained anymore. Zimbabwe could not be losing through sanctions $2 billion US in gold alone. Yeah, we are not counting other minerals. And for anyone to tell me the sanctions, of course, in the country to lose the same amount of money, I would like to hear them say that, because there's no way anyone can justify that. Even if they could, we can no longer deny that corruption is a serious problem in Zimbabwe. That is the point. This becomes even more important, particularly in the light of South Africa's position, South African government's position, the ANC government in South Africa's position, that not only were they blaming sanctions for Zimbabwe's economic meltdown, but they had actually declared last year at their own National Congress that they were not going to allow regime change in Zimbabwe as long as the sanctions are in place. In other words, there was going to be, Zanu PF was going to be voted out in the coming elections, to be happening in August. They believe it would have been because of the sanctions, and they were not going to allow Zanu to be a regime change because of the pressure from the sanctions. But now we know that corruption is actually the biggest problem, the biggest cancer that is that is causing Zimbabwe's economic meltdown. No one can pretend it was sanctions. But the biggest take home from this documentary is one of the dealers, the gold dealers in this documentary, is a Kenyan of Indian descent who, by his own admission in the documentary, was involved in the same business in Kenya, and he believed he is the one who managed to keep Arap Moi in power for 20 years. He used the proceeds from the looted diamonds. He got the exclusive license, just the same as Zanu PF has issued these gold dealers licenses to buy gold and then export gold and so forth. And he used the wealth he generated from that to help pay off Arap Moi's opponents, and thus keep Arap Moi in power during the 1990s. It was only when Arap Moi had left that the opposition were able to dig up and find out what was involved. And in the documentary, actually, one of the commentators said his operations in Kenya nearly bankrupted that country. But the amount of money he had, he was able to buy off political oppositions and buy off rivalries within Kenya itself. And of course, he shared some of the spoils with Arap Moi, so that he also was using some of that wealth for his own political ends. Anyway, the gentleman then got kicked out of Kenya due to political pressure from the opposition. And he settled in Zimbabwe. This was during Mugabe's time. And there's no doubt, of course, that he has been using some of the huge profits, wealth that he has managed to generate from his operations to keep Zanu PF in power, President Mnangagwa in power. This is a political reality that we cannot ignore. In the video, one of the gold dealers, a Zimbabwean, Angel, admits that Mnangagwa would win, boasted that Mnangagwa would win the 2018 elections. And he has already projected that he's going to win the 2023 elections. These people can say these things with confidence because they know the influence they have, their money has. There is no doubt that many of our opposition politicians have been compromised. One has got only to look at the opposition's performance to realize that there is something amiss here. In 2008 to 2013, MDC went into a government of national unity. The primary purpose of that GNU was to implement the democratic reforms designed to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. There is no doubt that Mugabe used his wealth from the looting, being in government, and so forth, to buy the opposition, to bribe them, to forget about the reforms. Some people have dismissed their failure to implement even one meaningful reform as breathtaking incompetence and corrupt. Yes, they are breathtakingly incompetent and they are corrupt. But after the 2013 election, some of them in the opposition have admitted that participating in these elections without reforms is absurd. People like Tendai BT have admitted that. David Coulter, the same thing. But what is surprising is that they went on to participate in the 2018 elections without even one meaningful reform implemented. Unbelievable. And they are doing the same thing in 2023. It doesn't make any sense to participate in an election process that is so flawed that you don't even have a verified voters roll. That the ruling party has managed to cherry pick who can vote, leaving out 30% of the eligible population in terms of the 3 million or so Zimbabweans in the diaspora who have been denied the vote. All these things point out one thing, that the opposition is compromised. That is a reality that we have got to face. That is a reality that we've got to deal with in Zimbabwe. We are not going to have any meaningful election until we implement meaningful reforms. The ruling party has been corrupted so much, as we had in the introduction of that documentary. The gold mafia have become more powerful than the government. Without reforms, there will be no meaningful change, no meaningful political change in Zimbabwe. If the mafia are now so powerful, they will either stop anybody removing Zanu PF, or if that should happen in the future, they will decide who will replace Zanu PF. In other words, the incumbent will just as much be in their pockets as the present system, the present regime. If we are serious about meaningful political change in Zimbabwe, then we must implement the democratic reforms in full and have a clean start. Without it, we're just wasting our time. The Al Jazeera documentary on gold smuggling in Zimbabwe shows how powerful the mafia has become. More powerful than the ruling party itself. Indeed, one could say the mafia are now the ones governing Zimbabwe. The individual we see in positions of power and authority are nothing more than just puppets doing the wishes, carrying out the wishes of the gold mafia. In this case here, yes, the gold is the one that Al Jazeera investigated. But the mafia in Zimbabwe controls gold, diamonds, lithium, platinum, the importation and sale of petroleum, medicine, everything, every sector of the Zimbabwe's economic activity, they control it. We are in serious trouble. The mafia have become incredibly powerful in Zimbabwe. They really are calling the shots. And the only way we're going to stop them is if we have a hope, in this case here, with the assistance of the UN, to implement the democratic reforms that will reform all our state institutions and system of government and have a clean start so that the mafia are not able to infiltrate and buy off politicians and influence and determine who governs the country, as is the case at present. Food for thought. Thank you very much and good night.